Welcome to the Seeking Wisdom podcast with Joni Marmo. Real stories, life lessons with faith at the center. Okay, so let's first start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together to have this wonderful conversation that we hope will be helpful and inspiring to all those who to listen to it or to watch it, that they may be filled with motivation to be able to continue to move forward. That is our goal, Lord, and we just ask for your help to bring down the Holy Spirit to help us effectively communicate what we need to communicate to be able to help others in this mission. And we ask you to just help us through this process of recording this episode, that all goes well and smoothly, and that we're protected from any evil and harm. And we ask this in Jesus' heavenly name. Amen.
Amen.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Let's go.
Let's go. So, are you one of those people who found your calling at a young age, and thanks to your hard work and determination, you turned it into a successful career? If you said yes, you are one of the lucky ones. And I know, because I happen to be one of those lucky people. When your profession is your vocation, it becomes intertwined with your life, that it now becomes your identity. So it's not so much about what you do, but who you are. But here's the problem. What happens when you no longer have that job or that career? Either because you decided to walk away, like in my case, or the rug gets pulled from underneath you, and suddenly your position, your role, your title is no longer yours. When that happens, the question now becomes, who am I, and what do I do now? In today's episode of the Seeking Wisdom podcast, my guest was thriving in her career until one day, out of the blue, it was taken from her. Processing the loss of her career and identity led her to redefine herself while helping others who are on a similar path. Please welcome professional communicator and author, Cynthia Gutierrez-White. Hello, Cynthia. Thank you so much for being here.
What an absolute pleasure, Joni. It is so nice for us to reconnect after all these years as well. But thank you for the incredible introduction. And I don't know if you saw me, but I raised my hand because I represent, I think, so many people who were comfortable in their job. And next thing you know, the rug was pulled out from under them, and they now question where they are in their lives and what their next step is. So I'm really happy we're having this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because, like you said, we were reconnecting after so many years. And I saw on LinkedIn that you had written this book, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And that's how I learned about everything that's happened to you. And it's unfortunately becoming so common, right? It's
Yes.
Commonplace for so many people going through this reinvention process because of a job loss, right? That either they chose or was chosen for them, right? And, honestly, both cases, even if you choose to walk away, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? So it's challenging either way, but I'm so happy that we're going to be able to have this conversation, because I know it's going to help so many people. Now, what I usually like to do in this podcast is just to give a little bit of context. I'm all about context.
Sure,
and so
sure.
I find that it's good to give people, a little bit of your background, just to set the stage for who you are. So tell us a little bit about, where you're from, your upbringing and things like that, because I think that informs then everything else.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, I love my story just because I love where I came from and where my parents came from and the childhood that they gave me due to their sacrifice. So I am a first-generation Colombian American, born and raised in South Florida. Grew up in the sunshine and palm trees and empanadas and batidos down the street and all that great stuff. I'm an only child. Both my parents came to the United States in their early 20s. They did not know each other. Through a mutual friend, they met, and they got married, and they had me. I grew up a lot of my time in Broward County, so it was interesting for me being first generation, trying to navigate both the world of your culture and of your heritage while trying to balance the expectations of what life is here in the United States, whether it's, your faith, your schooling, your relationships. But just like many other first gens across the country, I did my best. And, to your point, I found later on in my life my vocation, that is communications. It is the ability to feel comfortable in chaotic situations and try to find the clarity and share that with others so that other people can either prepare or be well informed so they can make good decisions. So I had the distinct privilege, and I do call it a privilege because I know not everyone has these experiences, but I got to work for the Archdiocese of Miami, where I got to cover the very historic papal visit. When Pope John Paul II did his historic visit in Havana, I was there with the press pool. I was like 23 years old.
Incredible.
From there, I moved to Miami Children's Hospital, and I know it has since been changed to Nicholas Children's Hospital, but my heart will always be with Miami Children's Hospital. At the time, it was the premier pediatric community healthcare system, but I know since then it has grown into such an incredible system across the state and beyond. And there I got to oversee their public and media relations, and I got to provide hope to many parents who are looking for solutions for their child, whether it's surgical or in consultations with a specialist, but to represent a beacon of hope and to give messaging to give parents peace of mind, to me was an incredible experience. From there, I moved on, to the American Red Cross. We're talking about this off camera.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible experience. I was there for 10 years and I was a part of their national communications team. And among other things, I was deployed many times across the country to serve as a public affairs point person, also a bilingual spokesperson. Whenever the media wants to know what is going on with a particular situation, whether it's a hurricane, an earthquake, or tornado, what is the Red Cross doing, and how is it that people can help? So in many ways, I was the face and the voice of the American Red Cross. Many times I was in your neck of the woods, whether it was Despierta America, where some of the other Primer Impacto, the other programs, where we were given the opportunity to share really important information to others. And then I found myself leaving South Florida, so saying goodbye to the empanada, saying hello to Maryland crab cakes. And I moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and that's where I am today. I was given an incredible opportunity to oversee the communication functions for Johns Hopkins Medicine, not just a flagship hospital in Baltimore, but with the incredible team that worked along with me. We were like family. We got to oversee the communications for the whole healthcare system. So we're talking internal, external, crisis comms, executive, anything with comms used to fall under our purview. And just continued on with communications. And I think the common denominator of all the different places that I've worked is using the skill set and the experiences that were given to me to help others during difficult times, whether it's spiritual with the Archdiocese or health and physical related with Johns Hopkins Medicine. But to your point, finding myself not knowing what to do when that rug was pulled out from under my feet, and realizing once, I was looking at this job market 3 months in after losing my job and not gaining any traction because all the playbook tactics that used to work were not working. So I pivoted and I became an author. So after talking to many people and doing boatloads of research and more talking and more interviewing and more introspection and talking to people going the same thing, I wrote a book for the same reasons, to find clarity among the chaos and to share a message with others to help them during difficult times.
Yeah, no, it's a remarkable story, and I have to say that I applaud you because you did this in record time. And I just recently heard I believe it was a homily from Father Mike Schmitz, and he was talking about he was going into talking about like God being the author of our lives kind of thing. So he was talking about writing books, but I don't know the statistics, but he cited them that I think it's like 80 80% of people want to write a book. And then a very small percentage, I don't remember the number, actually get to write something, like write it, but only like 1% get to publish it. So you're like a 1%er, right? And you did it in record time, which is amazing considering everything that you were going through. And and I want to touch on that, in a minute, because I want to take a couple of steps back, from like when you mentioned earlier about like your upbringing, right? And how you were navigating that being first generation American, and there's beauty in that, but there's also some challenges in that, right?
Absolutely.
And you're obviously a natural communicator. That's just a gift that you have. It's not something I think that's something that it's innate, right? You can learn certain skills, but I think in your case especially, it's very innate in you. And you and I again had talked offline. And I think it's important to bring this up because you wanted to be a reporter, right? And you mentioned, I read your book, by the way, and by the way, highly recommend Redefined, and we'll promote it again throughout the podcast. But I did want to bring this up because I think it's important, because you actually redefined yourself early on, because you wanted, and it cracked me up because you wanted to be Veronica Corningstone from the movie Anchorman, which, by the way, it's a hilarious movie.
It's so
But
funny.
it's hilarious. But you were seriously, though, inspired by Connie Chung, who, when we were growing up, she was a very serious, and very well regarded, news reporter and anchor. And she also, I'm not sure about her background, but I think she also was first generation, right? First
Absolutely.
generation.
She was the first female and first generation anchor for any U.S. news network
Yeah.
news. So for me at that time, I just looked up, to her, and it's like, wow, how cool is that? And even though, she's Asian and I'm Colombian, there is still something in me that said, you know what? This is something that I can do. And just seeing her every night, every weekday night, reading the news made it a possibility, made it that thought a possibility.
100%. I remember her too. And what I loved about her, she was so eloquent and
Yes.
smart and elegant and graceful. I don't know. She really and like you said, she broke ground because, it was not common for, I don't know if she was the first one or not, but I think she was. I'm not sure, like sitting at the news anchor desk.
For sure.
Yeah. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like, you redefined yourself back then, in terms of this is what you wanted to do. You got an internship before you got all these jobs that you mentioned, because you wanted to be a communicator in the aspect of like as a journalist, and you got an internship at a bilingual TV station, which again is interesting because it's very aligned with your upbringing, right?
Yes.
In terms of your culture and all of that. But there were two events that changed your perspective and your career trajectory. Can you talk to me about a little bit about those two things that happened, about what happened, with the big story in South Florida, but also a comment from an assignment editor that really just kind of shifted you?
It really did. And it made my decision an easy one. And this is what I mean by that. So, I just graduated college. I was 21 years old and I was hungry. I went to school in North Carolina. I moved back down to South Florida because I just missed the warm weather and my mom's cooking and just everything about South Florida enough for me to pack my things and move back down. After it seemed like months of interviewing and calling this TV station to see if they had made a decision of hiring me as an intern or not, I was given the opportunity. And it was a small bilingual, like you said, bilingual TV station. And it was dynamic, Miami Dynamic Cablevision. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
But a lot of the homegrown talent, broadcasting talent, are graduates of that little that little station, where you carried the camera, you did the actual interview, you went back and you edited the story, you wrote the script in both English and Spanish and had it ready and filed by 5 p.m. So
Yeah.
it was very much a hands-on experience, and one that I was so thankful to have, and just was ready to just sink in my teeth and to go, you know, down this path to become Connie Chung. And I think it was about 2 weeks in, and I'm totally dating myself here when you hear the lack of technology that's involved with this story. But I had arrived, it was 8 a.m., and the assignment editor, as you mentioned, was looking for the stories for us to do. I mean, there were several reporters, and I was hanging out with a different one every day. And she was looking in the newspaper, reading the newspaper, and calling the various PIOs. Those are public information officers across Miami-Dade County. So you have a PIO for Homestead, a PIO for Coral Gables, what have you. And what was she doing? She was looking for story ideas. She was looking for a story for us to cover, something for us to do so that we can relay it and broadcast it later on that afternoon. And this particular day, I guess it was a very quiet day in South Florida, which I know doesn't happen very often, but I can tell she was getting frustrated because she wasn't really going anywhere with the phone calls or just, the different newspapers. She had a Nuevo Herald, she had the Miami Herald, she had Diario de las Americas, like she was going the Miami, the Miami Business Journal. And in her frustration, she was like, I wish there was just like a stabbing or something. And she said it in such a breezy manner that it absolutely hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I remember sitting there in my 21-year-old mind thinking, why would I want someone to get hurt so that I have a job to do?
Yeah.
Why would we wish harm on someone so that I have a story to file later on? And that was a very brutal lesson too. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yes, that was a very common
Back then.
phrase.
It was very much the mantra
Yeah.
and sort of the culture in various newsrooms. And the optimist that I am, it's like, oh, no, there's so many good stories for us to tell. But when I heard that, it's like, gosh darn it. I don't want anyone to get hurt so that I had a story to report. And at the end of the day, we did find a story, and it did not require anyone getting mortally injured or wounded or anything like that. Thank goodness. And we filed the story, and it was just fine. So that was the first thing. So that was the first notch, and I kept that in the back of my mind, but, I went off, with my reporter, and we had a really good day. The second one revolves around an event that really brought the South Florida community together. And there's very few instances in my experience living in a community that really brings everyone together. There are joyous moments such as, let's say, a papal visit, or I don't know, your football team wins, or something that brings everyone together. And there are other situations that are very negative that unfortunately breaks down barriers among community members and brings us together. And this particular event was the kidnapping of a little boy by the name of Jimmy Rice. This happened down in the Redlands, so this is way further from the city of Miami. And I was working, still interning for this TV station. And just like many of all the of all the other media outlets, and this was beyond South Florida media market. This was regional, national, and maybe you can tell me, was it something that Univision Network, maybe it was even international, that something that garnered that level of attention. And it was everything that we did collectively as one media community to share the story so that we can find this child. Young boy, he was dropped off by the school bus. He only had to walk X amount of blocks. He never made it home. And when you see the eyes of a young child, it is very easy to see your own children's eyes through them. And it was a story that really brought us together because we wanted a happy resolution. We wanted to bring this child back to his mom and dad. And there wouldn't be a day where you wouldn't see his face on the news or plastered in the grocery stores, or you open up the newspaper, he was there with the latest information. Police officers looking for leads, and it was beyond Miami-Dade police. It was FBI. It was everyone. Again, it was all hands on deck on this particular case. There was a tip from someone who lived nearby the parents' house where they found a gun in her farm area. The investigators came. They found the owner of the gun. He was the person who kidnapped, assaulted, and killed the child. By this time, all of us, and I don't mean just me, I mean everyone that was covering the story, who was now waiting from the PIOs, the public information officers, to give us information about where this child was located. We were given the information from them of what they found out and the press conference the parents were having at their house. And by this time, we all knew where they lived. And it was a very heartbreaking and somber moment because this was not the answer we were looking for. You know, we all did everything we possibly could using the resources we can to find this child alive, but that was just not the case. And to pack up your gear, and very much like a caravan, there's a long line of live trucks and other vehicles lining up, driving to the parents' house. We were all waiting with bated breath, wondering how the parents were going to relay the information to us. And we all felt that heaviness. We all felt that burden. And when they came out, you know, all the microphones were up. They walked in with a very simple piece of paper in their hand. And it just broke us. But the message that they relayed, believe it or not, was one of gratitude. It was one of thankfulness for the community. It was one of thankfulness for all the different agencies that were involved in bringing this child home to their parents. It was thankfulness for the media in helping them share their story and trying to get as much, you know, images and information about this child out to the masses. And it was a message of thankfulness for people's thoughts and their prayers. And I could not imagine, again, in my 21-year-old mind, getting the news of losing your child and the message and the strength that you had to garner to share that message. And it's a message of gratitude. It was absolutely numbing. And when they were all, when the parents said what they had to say, we all turned off our cameras, and it was literally like a funeral, and we all cried. You know, when people say, oh, media, they don't have heart, or the reporters, they're just off to the story. I tell you, that is not the case. Everyone cried and everyone lined up as if it was a wake. And we all gave our condolences to this family. And we all had to go back to our respective TV stations and file a story, you know, for later on that evening. Some people went live, you know, did live remotes. Some of us had to go back to the stations, which is what I did. And I remember driving back home, still feeling kind of numb, kind of autopilot, driving back home to Broward County and telling my mom what happened. And just like everyone else, she was following the story, all the different developments, again, hoping against hope that the child would be found alive. And I told her what happened before the story aired, and it broke me. I thought it was incredibly sad. And that's when I made the pivot from broadcast journalism to public relations. And I said, you know what? I'd rather be on the other side of the camera and be the person to give information to media and to really focus on stories that bring positivity to others, to be a beacon of hope, or at least a person that can give them information, again, that can be of solace, that can be of betterment for people. And that's from there on out, that's why I aligned myself with organizations that do good. And it was because of Jimmy Rice.
Yeah, I remember that story. It was so tragic, being here in South Florida, and also, it was for those of us who grew up here. It also was a reminder of what had happened with Adam Walsh years prior, when I was a
Yes.
kid. So, yeah, it was kind of like,
Yes.
like you said, it was just national news and perhaps even international. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because, and I got this from your book, and I love the way you phrased it. It's like you wanted to tell and shape stories to make a difference in the world.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted you to share that part of your story is because I think it really defines, and again, going back to the title of your book, Redefined, but I think it defined then the rest of the trajectory of your career and what you ended up working on, because you did work on, with organizations that, like you said, that were, their goal was to do good, to help others. You and I met through the Red Cross,
Mhm.
and we were, laughing, because of the coincidence, which I don't believe in coincidences, but this is a Red Cross pin
Mhm.
that you had given me when we did the telethon to help the victims of the Haiti earthquake back in 2010. And you were that liaison for us in the broadcast media as we were doing this telethon, just to be able to effectively communicate, this is
Correct.
what's happening, these are the things
Correct.
that the Red Cross is doing. And it's a beautiful journey that you had in your career, and as you mentioned briefly a few minutes ago, right, like you worked in all of these different organizations, right? And different types, right? The Archdiocese of Miami is, the Catholic organization here
Mhm.
in South Florida, to a children's hospital,
Mhm.
which can be so heartbreaking when you see children that are sick. But at the same time, if you're able to, like you said, give out, create positive messages that will inspire people to want to help,
Mhm.
these families. And then the Red Cross, and you move to Maryland, John Hopkins Medicine, etc. It's just a beautiful story. You know what I mean? That
Thank you.
you were busy crafting stories, but you were also crafting your own story.
Correct. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
I wanted to highlight that because I think that it's important to this particular conversation that we're having, because you end up really creating a very successful career for yourself while you're helping other people, and you were doing
Correct.
it with intentionality. and i
Absolutely.
think and I think that that's a gift, and it's a blessing. Not everybody gets to have that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Congratulations to you in that sense that you were able to accomplish that, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
But the day that everything changed, oh my goodness, here we go.
Here we go.
Whoop.
I'm ready. I'm cracking my knuckles. I'm ready
Yeah.
for it.
We're making a sharp right turn or left turn, depending on how you want to look
We're
at it. But
turning.
yeah, so you had this incredible career. You ended up working for remind me, an organization, a strategic group, right?
Correct. So, living here in the DMV, which is what we affectionately call the area of DC, Maryland, Virginia, I worked for an agency based out of Alexandria. So it's right out of the DC area, and putting on my disaster management, emergency management hat on, I was the senior director of corporate communications for Tidal Basin. And that is a firm that helps municipalities, health systems, universities, states, in preparation and recovery of natural disasters and also man-made, but mostly natural disasters. Some of the clients that we helped included the state of Michigan before and after COVID. Same thing with the state of Florida. We were very instrumental after the wildfires that afflicted Maui a couple of years ago, and we worked with them in how to best use the funds, whether it's through FEMA, through the state, and to make themselves much more strong come the next one. So mitigation had a lot to do with the system that we have with this company. I enjoyed working there. I loved the team I was working with. I mean, it was really good. What happened to me
I'm
is
sorry,
that, yes,
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt, but really quickly, was this a private company? This
yes.
wasn't, so it wasn't a government organization.
No, no, we
This was a
worked very
private company.
closely
Okay.
with government agencies, but yes,
Okay.
the organization itself is a for-profit private company. Correct. And believe it or
Yeah.
not, my first corporate job. Because of all the things that we mentioned before, I've always, stuck with nonprofits or healthcare systems because I find them to be so much more mission based. But when I found this company, I saw a lot of commonalities where there's very much a humanitarian lens and let's help communities be stronger for the next event. So I was really aligned with that. I was really gung ho. And the fact that I had a fantastic supervisor, incredible colleagues where, we were sometimes hanging out after hours and whatnot. We really built a really cool team together. And my job, like so many others, was eliminated. And I'm just going to be very honest right now. I mean, statistics are not on my side because actually statistics will say that the majority of people will be laid off from their job at some point in their career. In my an exception, absolutely not. As you read my book, you saw that I lost my job. That was like from page one.
Yeah.
So, but
And this
regardless,
was after a merger, right? Because the company merged.
correct.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. And I was going to ask you about that because there's always, when there's a merger, there's always, to your
Hmm.
point, the statistics say chances are you're gonna be affected by some sort of
Correct.
layoff, right? So when you hear the word merger, it's like, it's like you're
Hmm.
waiting for the tsunami to hit, right?
Correct.
But and then there's also, change in the political climate, which because you were working with government agencies and whatnot.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of change going on. But did you feel before this happened to you, did you feel any sort of uncertainty? Did you feel like, ooh, I'm next? Did you have an inkling that this was going to happen, or did this
Yes,
catch you
yes.
off guard?
Yes and no. So to your point, you've been around long enough, you know that whenever there's a merger or acquisition, there's always like a silent deadline to your point where you feel like that shoe is going to drop. And there were some, murmurs about it. Oh, next year, maybe. But then you hear the party line, which I'm sure is not just with this company, but across the board with, oh, this is great for the company. More resources. We'll be able to attract better contracts. This is better for the company because we're going to grow, take us to the next level. You know the party line. And so you want to believe in it. And there were some grumblings of possible layoffs, but honestly, I'm going to be completely blunt. I thought it was fine. I thought it was safe.
Yeah. And that's what happens. And that's why I wanted to bring it up because, sometimes you do get that ominous feeling like the dark cloud, you're underneath it. But there's other times where the communication, within the company, everything's great. Everything's fantastic. All the quarterly reports, we've
Yep,
had a record year,
absolutely.
blah, blah, blah. So you're within the construct of, okay, there's a big change, but I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling
Yeah,
okay. Right?
really great evaluation. We're talking about
Right.
raises, bonuses. So the telltale signs, at least for me in the position that I occupied, I felt pretty solid. You know what? Um, I'm going to weather this storm. It's going to be a-okay. Until I got an email on January the 27th.
Yeah.
That's where the
And
book starts.
right. And really quickly, and no offense here because we're the same generation, but like this is important also to emphasize, you were not a rookie. Like in other words, you're an experienced, veteran, right? I know the word veteran makes it whatever, makes you sound old, but in no way, shape, or form am I calling you old. But I
Experience.
say it in the context of, it's not like you were just starting out in your career and you didn't have experience to read the signs. And I think that's important to also identify that you're, you're an experienced woman, that you've been around. So this is why it's important that this email comes to you on January 27th. And what is this email? Tell us what happened on
So
January 27th and thereafter.
it was an invitation for a meeting the next morning. In the subject line, it was touch base. Now, normally I'd be like, okay. But what made me go, what gave me pause is who it was from and the relationship that I have with this person. So again, this is something that I think comes with experience, something that you just mentioned. And those were the tea leaves. Those were the breadcrumbs. Because normally with this gentleman, he's a part of the C-suite, obviously very high ranked, very influential, and we have a very good working relationship. Whenever there was something that needed either crisis communications, external communications, he would never hesitate to pick up the phone or text me. So there was never a touch base. It's, hey, Cynthia, you got a couple of minutes? I need to talk to you about, we need to help our client do this, or we need to be ready for an article that's going to come out about X, Y, and Z in the Washington Post. He had never hesitated in the past to get in touch with me right then and there. So I never had a touch base with this gentleman, ever. So the fact that he carved out time to touch base, and that's, to your point, that's when I said, okay, something is not quite right here. So you can imagine that night, doing the best I can, going through my projects, but having this in the back of my mind. And the next day was January the 28th. And the meeting started. Was there a couple minutes early just because I was anxious and I really wanted to get this out of the way because I had meetings scheduled for the rest of the day. I had projects. Right. I am on deadline. I have deliverables, but this is obviously very important. Let's touch base and let's go on with our day.
Now, important to the story, this is not in person.
This is not in person. Thank you for
That's important. Yes.
It is important. I don't know where he was located at the time because he does do a lot of traveling, but I was at my home office right here in Baltimore, and it was on Teams, and I'm there, and like, boop, our faces pop up, and very familiar face. Hey, how you doing? He was as pleasant as always. Oh, I'm good. How are you? How's the weather? Oh, well, here in Baltimore, where it's a little chilly, it's a little snowy. How about you? So.
Small talk.
Small talk, the chit chat, the tiki, whoever you want to call it.
I love it, the tiki. Let's bring the bicultural back in. Yes, I love it. When you know, you know.
The tiki. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I got a little tired of the pleasantries. I literally just wanted to just dive right in, just jump right in head first. And I said to him, hey, so what do you want to touch base about? No, but before that, it's like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm frankly a little anxious. So I just want to dive right in and let's just see what it is that I can help you with so that we can move on to our other projects. And then he goes, oh, it's nothing, oh, I'm sorry that I feel worried. Why are you so nervous? I'm like, I just don't know. I mean, I feel like you're either going to bring me in a very high profile project or you're going to tell me something that's going to require me to change my resume. And he sat there for a second and he lowered his head and he goes, yes. And I'm like, yes to what? To which one? Is this
I give you two options here.
Which one? Este o lo otro. Tell me what it is. Is it the apple or is it the orange? Is it, tell me what? And I'm thinking, okay.
I can't believe we're laughing about this, but.
But you know what? That's life. At some point, you kind of have to laugh sometimes because if not, you go cuckoo. And I said to him, like, what? He goes, I'm sorry that we have to let you go. I'm like, what? And that's when I just literally, and it was right here in the seat. I remember sitting back and I'm thinking, what is happening? And then more pleasantries. I am so sorry. This is not a reflection of you wonderful evaluations. This hurts me as much as it hurts you, like all those things. And I remember with my pen and my pad feverishly taking notes, like PTO, severance pay, my computer, whatever. And then he's like, okay, HR is going to be joining us now. And then I'm a beautiful lady joins us in our conversation with her accent. I didn't know if she was from the Bahamas or Jamaica. And I remember thinking, wherever she's from is where I want to be right now. I remember thinking that at that moment, I was listening to her beautiful accent. It's like, oh my gosh, to have a rum and coke on a beach right now, wherever she's from, that's where I literally want to be right now. Holy crap, this sucks. And then she's talking and talking. And again, I wake up for a second, more notes. What do I do with the corporate card? What do I do with the people I have meetings with? And then she said, don't worry. Everything's going to be emailed to you. Let's confirm your personal email address. And I did. And I just went, and I sat back and I literally let everything wash over me. And it's like, here we go. And then when it was over, it was over. I no longer had access to the team, to my files, to my email, nothing. It was done. And for many people, that is that. Yeah. Terminó la historia. The story is over. But because I still am close to many colleagues throughout the organization, this started going like crazy. The texts, the group chats, oh my gosh, I was laid off. So are you. Oh my gosh, have you heard about so-and-so? I'm so sorry to hear. And it was an emotional and volatile roller coaster ride for hours like this. Just when you think you're kind of getting a handle, bing! Oh my gosh, this person was laid off too. Can you believe it? Are you doing okay? What are you going to do? You're okay. Bing! This person as well. And it was literally, it was an interesting experience and I don't recommend it. And it was numbing yet jolting every time you got a new message or a new text from someone that you care about that they are now unemployed. And it was trying to make sense of that. And as I sat in this chair, again, I was just kind of numb, autopilot. It was hearing my husband in the kitchen that brought me back to reality. It's like, okay, I need to let people know, people outside the work folks, but people in my periphery, I need to let know. And that's how everything started after my layoff.
As I listen to you, it's just so incredible to me because I find that also it's becoming the new norm that we just are, we being society, are laying people off in such a cold manner, through teams. And then, okay, as soon as I disconnect here, that's it. Beep, boop, boop. You're done. You're zero access. So you don't even have an opportunity to I don't know, close your books or like in your case, you had connection with certain clients and things like that. Just kind of have that closure, that I find it so abrupt. And it in addition to just the reality of the fact that you're being told you're losing your job, and in your case, you were not expecting that, right? You had, less than 24 hours of kind of something weird is going on, but let's see what's going on.
Correct.
And it just brings me back to unfortunately, when I was, the last few years of my career, I had to lay off a lot of people, and we did that in person though. We would bring people into the office. It doesn't make it any better, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
But there is something to be said about, that connection, you know what I mean? And to give people an opportunity to go back to their desks, to be able to, in certain cases, we had different policies, in the different times that we did it of, you could stay on for a few more weeks, you could stay on for a month, just to give people a chance to kind of acclimate to their new reality. And I find that now it's okay, as soon as I disconnect this Teams call, you're done. Bye,
Thank you for your services.
Yeah. And I think that there's an additional layer of shock. Right? I think because you don't have the closure.
No, and you hit the nail on the head. It was just very abrupt and not given the opportunity to go through the ritualistic things of packing up your box with your plant inside.
Yeah. That
experience has been taken away from you. And when you spend years building relationships with vendors, with clients, with colleagues, with your team, to have that taken away from you as abruptly as it did, it is very shocking. And like I said, it's very numbing because you kind of go into survival mode and you kind of lock yourself in, and what comes after that, I think, is also very telling of these type of experiences in terms of the isolation and the confusion and disorientation that comes after that. But yeah,
100%.
it is what
But
it
you,
is.
yeah, I'm sorry.
I
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's just, it is what it is. It could have been nicer if it had been this way, or should have been done this way. You know what? Fine. But would it, those experiences given my job back? No. Um, I am a different person now, 1 year later, looking back. And not that I am thankful, but in some ways I am kind of thankful because of the things that I've learned and some of the challenges that I have addressed and learned from. It's made me a better person. So I I challenge people during these difficult times, especially if you're finding yourself in between jobs, to look at it from a different perspective. Especially if it is a situation that you cannot control. There's nothing more that you can do. Like you said, that chapter is closed. The plug has been pulled. You no longer have access to anything related to this company. Um, it is time to move forward. And that's what the book is about.
Yeah. And it's interesting because and that's why I like to give context, right? As to, who you were and the things you've been
Mhm,
through,
mhm.
because you, Cynthia Gutierrez-White, went into immediate action mode. So
Yes.
I remember you telling me, when we first, had our conversation to prep for this podcast, where you
Right.
immediately sat down. I mean, after the shock of like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
okay, get me off this
Yes.
roller coaster because I'm nauseous. Um,
Yes. Let me off.
you get me off, but you sat down with your husband and you said, okay, like, let's look at our finances and what are the things that we need to cut back on.
Yes.
And I remember you sharing that with me and I'm thinking, wow, like hats off, because I don't think most people do that necessarily, because like I think some people hold out for hope, or they're still like in such shock that you're still kind of like dazed and confused. But you immediately went into like, okay, Excel spreadsheet, let's start cutting things. What do we need to eliminate from our finances to make this work? And something else that I really like, wow, I mean, again, applaud you. You also mentioned that you included your kids
Hmm.
in this conversation. And how old are your kids?
21 and 12.
Wow. So like I thought that was fantastic, where it's like it's not to scare them or to be like, go hide under your bed, like this is really
Right,
bad.
right.
But it's more of like, hey, we're a family
Hmm.
and this is going to have an impact on all of us.
Yep.
We want you to know this is what's going on.
Hmm.
Let's talk about this as a
Correct.
family. So like, tell us a little bit about like that thought
That
process, because I think
mindset.
that's great advice, honestly.
So I tell you what, these are all lessons learned from the places where I worked. So when I worked at Nicholas Children's Hospital, Miami Children's Hospital, I was absolutely enthralled with a discipline and department called Child Life. These are young men and women, and they went to college for this, like their degrees in child life. And the role of this position is to make the transition between home life and hospital life as seamless as possible, giving the child opportunities to be in control in an environment where they feel like they have zero control. Whether it is through play, whether it is through drawing, through music, through art, it is trying to empower the child during a very difficult time in a very age appropriate manner, so they feel much more confident and much more empowered to be in control of their situation. In a nutshell, that is what child life is about. But they use bubbles and balloons and puppets and play and pet therapy, and they have the most incredible resources and tools at their disposal. So if you want to tip your hat off to Child Life, because I learned that from them, so that when there is a moment of crisis, if there is a moment of challenge, bringing your children on board, explaining things in an age appropriate way makes them feel less afraid and more empowered. Of letting them know, okay, that big trip that we were planning to X, Y, and Z this summer, we're going to have to scale that back and stay more around town. And guess what? The kids said, fine, no problem. Why? Because they feel that their decisions are making an impact to the team, the family as a team. And it's, again, and you said this very poignantly, it's not to scare them. It's to make them feel a part of something bigger. And this is a team activity. And then going back to your other point about, having the clarity, and I giggle because, clarity is very relative, but having the clarity of, okay, what are the expenses that we're going to cut? Let's drop the spreadsheet. Let's do this. Let's do that. That is from my Red Cross training, because when you find yourself deployed to X state, X city, after or before a disaster, whether it's a slow moving hurricane or after a tornado, your job is to make sense of the chaos, of quickly assessing and reassessing your environment, your landscape, figuratively and literally, and moving forward to tell your story of what is happening to the people affected, what the Red Cross is doing, what you can do to help those and impact them to make their day a little bit brighter. So it's having the training from the healthcare systems, from disaster management, that helped me kind of get back on my feet. But I don't want this to sound very self-serving, because trust me, there are times where I'm like, what the heck is happening? Like, I just need to sit down and just think this through, because I can't believe this crap is happening right now. So please don't think that I'm just like, oh, I got this. No, 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 no. I mean, the training helped me because it did provide direction. It provides focus. And that's what I help in writing, and doing these talks and giving lectures and writing the book, is what I want to share with others. The things that I have learned from my experience to help them with their next step forward.
Yeah.
But that's how I got it. And it's truly from standing on the shoulders of others, whether it's Child Life or all the other disaster response specialists that have gone on to they've been deployed to a million other responses. And I've learned from them by doing it with them.
Yeah.
So I literally applied those skills to this.
And that's why, and I bring it up because, to your point, like, the emotional aspect of it, and the grief and the loss of losing your job, and like we mentioned earlier, your identity, right? Because
No,
your
absolutely.
job became who you were, right?
Absolutely.
But these I tell these to my students and people that I mentor. It's like, every job that you've had will add value to your life in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
You will always learn a new skill that you will be able to apply in you never know what, right? And in this case, you mentioned it, like, this experience that you've had, this work experience that you've had, helped you in this moment of your personal crisis. You were involved in other people's crises for years, but now all of a sudden it became a personal crisis for you. And so you were able to, like, use those skills to help you go through the crisis. And, it really, I mean, it sounds melodramatic, but it is a crisis when you lose your job, right?
Absolutely.
And for some people more so than others, because, we need our income, right? And we need our stability or health insurance, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a reason why we work, right? And so you mentioned something so important, because there is grief and loss, more than just the obvious, right? Of, like, I just mentioned, income and whatnot and stability, but there is that loss of your identity, of what do I do now? Who am I? And the key word also that you mentioned, isolation. You start to feel very isolated.
Correct.
And something that you and I talked about is, the hard part of nowadays looking for a job. Looking for a job has always been difficult. But I feel that nowadays the process is so impersonal because you're throwing out your resume into some algorithm and you don't
Mhm.
know if it's ever going to land, on the desk of a human being or, at the eyeballs of a human being.
In your favor, correct.
Yes, you just don't know, and you don't know if the even the job posting is real, right? Because at this point, it's like you have to question it: is it real, or are they just checking off a legal box?
Hmm.
There's so many variables nowadays that really make it difficult for people to find work. So talk to me a little bit about that journey of just going out and looking for
Sure.
work, and because that really is what informed you to like say, you know what, I'm going to write this book. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that journey.
So, call me strange, but literally the day after, maybe 2 days after my layoff, I cracked open the books. And I mean that incredibly figuratively because I'm at my computer.
Yeah.
And I felt very optimistic in the sense of, okay, let's find my next adventure. Let's find the next chapter of my career book. Because in the past, Joni, I'll be completely honest with you, it had been relatively easy for me. Whether it was because I was recruited or I just wrote a pretty good darn cover letter or I had a connection in, within X company. So for me, that had always been the playbook, whether it's a connection, send the resume, cover letter, 2, 3 interviews. With Johns Hopkins, that was like 7, but I get it because it's Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
The thank you notes, and you hear relatively in a relatively short period of time after that last interview. So, going back to something that you mentioned, yes, there is grief. Yes, there is isolation because you start questioning your skill sets. You start questioning, and well, what was it about me? It was, what was it about my role or the way that I did that work within that role. But I brushed it off, and it's like, okay, let's see what my next adventure is, and I'm really excited because I'm now a free agent. Fast forward 3 months, I was in what I call panic productivity. And one thing that I learned about this time in my life was that just because you're busy does not mean you're making progress.
I love that.
Found myself applying to any job that had to do anything with communications. And after 3 months and with one callback, I was exhausted. That optimism had se me fue. It just flew,
Deflated. Yeah.
it flew out the window. That confidence, job, yes. Who's going to be the next cool person I'm going to work with? New team, all that good stuff. That was like a deflated balloon as it went across the room. And I was questioning my value. I was questioning my skill sets. I was even questioning if communications was still my vocation, if it was still my career of choice because of all the different things that are happening in today's job landscape. I had reached a point where it was between uploading your resume and manually putting all the places you've worked in, chronological order, for the 5th time. Mind you, I was filling out applications every day of the week. During the weekdays, 8 to 10 hours a day, weekends about 4 hours a day. So again, panic productivity because my severance has a deadline. I have a date circled on my calendar and I need to beat that deadline. And as journalists, as PR people, we're also driven by deadlines. That motivates us. So, after 3 months and only getting one call back and crickets from everyone else, I remember being in the kitchen and Jeffrey, my husband, and you read the book. He's peppered all throughout because he is amazing. He's my best friend, my husband, my mentor. He's my everything. And he goes, "Hey, babe, I notice sometimes you're gone for a long time, like from the house." And that question was very poignant because it really made me think. because I had been so focused on the computer. I had my spreadsheet, all the people that I've talked to, all the applications I've sent out, the millions of different versions of my resume, what have you. And I said to him, after I finally realized what the answer was, I said, you're right. I said, I equate the house with my office. During COVID, like many people, I have a nice little nook of the home that is dedicated to my work. I don't have a purpose for that anymore, that space. And when I see the empty space, it's just a reminder that I don't have a job. And as something that you mentioned before, we are of a culture where so much emphasis is placed on what we do, the titles that we carry, and what that means to our identity. Especially being a child of immigrants, where you want to do your parents proud. And a lot of it has to do with what you do from 9 to 5 and the level of responsibility you're given from whatever company that you're working for. That struggle is real, and you don't want to be a disappointment to them. And even though my parents have passed, I still think about that. I still want to make my parents proud because of all the sacrifice they've done for me. And it's like, I don't want to hear my parents in the back of my mind saying, but we gave you an education. We sent you to college. What are you doing without a job?
Yeah.
So, tell me yes or no. Tell me that's not true. It is 100%
Cynthia,
true.
I mean, this is your story, but I just have to interject when you mentioned that when I decided to walk away from my career, the last person I told was my mom.
I believe
because
it.
I didn't know how to tell her. How am I going to tell my mom that I have quit my job? Because, like to your point, it's this thing of like, we grew up in an environment where we saw our parents sacrifice so much so that they could give it to us. Because it wasn't even for them, it was for us. Yes. And so there's this responsibility that's ingrained in us of like, okay, we have to give it back to them. And the way we do that is by, hey, this is what I did. I remember like, yes, every time I got a new business card with like a new title, I would give it to my mom, and ever since she's passed, I've been going through her things. I have found all my business cards and with my little, my little signature, love you, mom. Thank you. So I understand 100% where you're coming from because it's this thing of, oh my gosh, like even you think about, okay, my parents, like, my family, which by the way, my mom was she was okay with me walking away. That's just to clarify. She didn't make me feel bad.
I have no doubt.
But you still feel that guilt, I guess. I don't know what it is, but
that pressure, wanting to always keep your parents proud of you as a homage and as a way of honoring their sacrifice.
Yes.
And growing up in this country, we have a better idea of what the different disruptors are in job markets, throughout the years, and where our parents didn't. You go to school, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a good job. In their mind, that's just how it should be. And yes, in a perfect world, yes, that should be there. But there's just some dynamics in today's job market, and I know we'll talk about it in a minute, that is making that so challenging right now. So, and telling Jeffrey, yes, being at home is a constant reminder that I don't have a job. I told him I'm burnt out. I have sent, I don't know how many, I showed him the spreadsheet. These are the number of applications I filled out. I've gotten one call back. And he said something to me that, again, pivot point. He goes, stop what you're doing. It's not working. The playbook that you've been working from no longer works. You're going to have to change. And you know what? I couldn't even argue with him if I wanted, because guess what? The proof was in the pudding. This amount of applications out, one callback. And that, no pun intended, that was the beginning of a new chapter for me. Wow. Because he encouraged me to reach out to people, talk to people, do research, see what's truly going on in today's job market. And that became the beginning of what is now a book, because I learned so much through those conversations, through those hours of research, whether it's, through AI or just the media or just asking around, peer-reviewed journals, and just talking to people also navigating their own job loss, people who are currently employed but are seeing trends, people that are ahead of the trends and are seeing things looking back. I tried to talk to all those people. And what came about was a new playbook. And that's the message that I want to share with everyone else, is that if you find yourself in a situation where you have to make a pivot, where you have to look back and decide, I need to make a change, whether it's your career. Well, this is mostly centered around career. But from what I heard from people that read the book, they can apply it to different things in their lives. It gives them the tools to proceed with confidence. Because at least when it comes to job search, it is a whole new ball of wax out there. And after all these conversations, and I ask questions like, how are you using AI right now? Do you see a future in communications? What do you see? You know my skill sets. You've worked with me before. How do you see me fitting in corporate America now and within the next 5 years? Those are the type of questions I ask people. And then I was getting all this information, and that vocation, that voice started calling for me again, saying, why am I gatekeeping this information when there's so many people out there hurt right now? And so by this time, this is now around April, May. So Doge has been in full effect here in the DMV. So a lot of the federal workers, and it was mostly impactful, I mean, across the country, yes, but mostly, again, in the Virginia, D.C., Maryland area, because we're the hotbed of federal jobs. A lot of people were cut off. You think it was unceremonious what they did to me. What happened to those people is without explanation. It's terrible. I've had very close friends from NIH, FDA, USAID. These are people who are highly educated, incredibly effective and efficient in what they did. Again, from one day to another, talk about the rug being ripped out from under them, found themselves jobless. Talking to them allowing me to follow them in their job search, them giving me lessons that I am now sharing with everyone else. Learn from us so that it saves you time should you find yourself in between jobs or wanting to make a leap to something else, in your career. So that's how this all came about. That vocation is, again, who am I to gatekeep all this great information? Let me share it with others. And that's how this came to be.
And that's how the book started. That's wonderful. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be able to say, this is because a lot of times, and this is why I'm enjoying this journey of this podcast, because it's not just about telling the stories, but it's also about the lessons that we're learning from them, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing that you went through this. And you're still going through it, by the way. It never really ends, right? But, but the fact that you were able to find that first of all, you heard the call and you answered the call and you went ahead and did it. Kudos to you for doing that, because what I loved about the book was also the fact that it's not just your story. You actually took all of these different people's stories and you included them and their perspective and their journey. And that's really you're tipping your hat to them as well, right? And giving them that space and the stage to say, hey, this is my story and this is what I've learned. And it's wonderful to be able to do that. So thank you, because, like you said, I read the book. I enjoyed it. I read it as part of, my homework. But also I wanted to support you. And I think it's a really, really good book, because like you said, it's not just about, the work environment, but it's also, you can apply it to different things, right? And different ways of learning about it. But one of the things that I love that you said is that behind every layoff is a life. And something that we talked about was, when we talk about numbers, right? Like,
Absolutely.
10,000 jobs, such and such company is laying off 4,000 jobs. Those numbers are thrown around so easily, but those are 4,000 lives that have been impacted. And more so because it's not just that single person, that person, and like in your case, you have two children and a husband. So it's four people that are impacted by this job loss, right? And so I think also as a society, we also have to pause and look at this through a different lens and have a little bit more empathy,
Correct.
in this process, and
Hmm.
help people and also, by the way, hiring managers and all of that, can we have a little bit more empathy and, try to figure out a new process? And I know you're all overwhelmed as well, receiving thousands of
Hmm.
resumes, but find a new way of like getting back to people because it's dejecting, it's demoralizing. People find themselves going through depression. Like
Hmm.
there's so many different elements of grief, that people go through in this journey that you highlight in the book, that I think is important, and your purpose gets challenged, your identity
Hmm.
gets challenged.
Your
You start
value,
to,
you question your value.
yes, and so it gets disrupted,
Hmm.
and so um I don't know. What are some insights from the people that you talk to that you would, want to share?
There were various takeaways from my own experience and from the people who were, and by the way, I will always be incredibly grateful to them for their honesty, for their time, for their vulnerability, and sharing their stories with me. And I took that responsibility very seriously. And just so that you know, every time I worked on their profile, I always shared it with them just to make sure that I captured their voice and I captured their message, to their liking. So I just wanted to put that out there because I'll always be incredibly grateful for them, especially during a very vulnerable time in their life to say, okay, I'll share my story and I'll let you share it with everyone else around the
Yes.
world.
Yes,
You have to
yes.
do right by them. No pressure. But there's several things that I learned collectively, in before the book, after the book, writing the book. And that is you need to give yourself grace. You need to take a moment and pause and just let the experience wash over you. Because as soon as you come face to face with it and accept, okay, I lost my job. I have nowhere to go next Monday, no more meetings. My colleagues I can't really talk to them right now because they're overwhelmed and I'm here debating what my next step will be. Give yourself that moment to praise yourself and everything that you have accomplished thus far. Wherever moment you are in right now, it is the accumulation of all the experiences that you've had. Celebrate that. Not just the fact that you were, laid off, but celebrate your wins. Celebrate your promotions. Celebrate all the achievements that you have done. That has not been taken away from you. Pause and look at the things that you can control and try. And I know it's easier said than done, but try to let go of the things that you cannot control. This is a time for you to reevaluate and see what brings you joy. We don't talk about joy enough in today's world. Oh my gosh. And you turn on the news, you listen to whatever podcast, read, war in Iran, economy is cuckoo bananas. You don't see much joy these days.
Mm-mm.
But during this pause period, you think back on the things that bring you joy. For example, this one young lady that I profiled, her name is Chanapa. Her things of joy is outdoor walks, iced coffee, her pets, her husband, and if they can't afford it, maybe a trip. But those are the things that bring her joy. For my other friend, it is gardening because it reminds her of her abuelito, where she grew up in Miami. It is her pets, her new baby. So these are the things that keep you grounded. These are the things that remind you that you are so much more than your job. You're so much more than your job title.
Yeah.
Go back to them as often as you want. For me, it's my children, my pets, my plants. COVID project. I now have a million plants. But guess what? Each one has a name, and I love every single one of them. So what I'm saying is that when I'm stressed out, pet and plant chores, and you know what? 2 hours later of having my hands dirty and repotting and all, I feel like a brand new person. So do not deprave yourself of joy because that's going to keep you grounded and it's going to bring you happiness. Another thing that I learned is that this is the time to seek out community. This also helps beat isolation. When you are being ghosted, which is no response at all, or the few responses that you get is we've decided to go with another candidate, or this position is no longer available, or what have you. It's better to experience that with friends.
Yeah. Yeah,
Case in
100%.
point, the young lady who gardens in honor and remembers of her abuelito, she used to work for USAID. She is relatively young, but a lot of her colleagues, all of them let go, are much older. They were actually like lifers. They had been in with USAID for decades, finding themselves in a job market of not knowing even how to upload a resume. She built community with her colleagues. They would have potluck dinners. And in addition to the comidita and whatever, el congri, whatever you want to make and share with the others, people brought their computers. They did their resumes together. She taught them how to upload them. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. It's building community. You feel less isolated. You're helping others, which in turn really helps yourself.
That's
Another
beautiful.
thing
It's
to
so
do
true.
is you've got to understand what's happening in today's job market. At the end of the day, I equate it to like a perfect storm or hearkening back to our high school textbook days. I think of it as a Venn diagram. Remember with the circles and all that good stuff?
Yes.
It's a three-part Venn diagram where you have economic volatility. That's what happened to me. Merger acquisition. They had to reduce the headcount. When I was writing this book, a lot of federal policy changes. Case in point, Doge, where like a site cut off thousands and thousands of hardworking jobs from people who were incredible at what they did. And then the third one is the one that's been making the most headlines, and that's AI. Put all those three little circles together, that little sliver right in the middle. That's where you put the arrow and say, you are here.
Hmm.
That is where we are. So if there is a plan for people to move forward, regardless of industry that they're in, is that you have to learn AI. Because at the end of the day, this is not transient. This is a new model of what business is going to look like, regardless of the industry that you're in. And here it is. It's here to stay. This is the most elementary stage we're going to be with AIs today, because tomorrow is going to be even better, bigger, faster, bigger, faster. So we're never going to be at this point again. So to have a better understanding of where you are in your field, you have to have a really soul searching time in figuring out what are the things that AI can't touch right now. And these are what were at one point considered soft skills. To your point, empathy, the ability to read the room, nuance, judgment, compassion. I get it. But for me, I need practical things. What does empathy in the workplace look like? What does compassion in the workplace look like? How's that going to help me keep my job? So in that case, I say, look at what you do on a daily basis when it comes to your job. What are the things that heavily relies on relationship building? Again, the compassion, the judgment, all that good stuff. And what are the things that require you to do in front of a computer? The tasks that requires you to be digitized using a computer, reading, writing, analyzing, reporting, those are the tasks that are being quickly delegated to AI. But the things that do not require to do in front of a computer are the skill sets that are going to make you relevant, make you marketable. What is that? Making relationships, building bridges, patient care. Until we have humanoids, which I hope isn't until another 1,000 years,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
these are the things that are going to help you.
Somebody's at the door, I guess, and my dog is barking. We just keep moving forward.
Okay. Those are
Probably
the
an
things,
Amazon delivery.
probably by drone.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, those are the skill sets that you need to lean into. And you need to really be curious about AI. And there's two ways of doing that. Several people are using the default AI, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Anthropic, or what have you. I encourage everyone to at least get the middle version, which is about $20 a month. And why is that? The models are faster, they're better, and the data sets that they use are more recent and they're better. They're cleaned up more.
Yeah.
Better data set to use. The top tier set, which tends to be $200 a month, are usually more for corporations, not so much for individual use. But using the default free version compared to the 20-month is literally the difference between a rotary phone and today's iPhone. That's the difference. You need to be aware of how you can use it. The second thing I recommend is for you to challenge your AI. What does that look like? It depends on whatever field you're in. If you're in law, for example, put in a contract in and challenge it. Say, help me look for clauses that can be harmful to my client. Challenge it. If you're an accountant, give it a very messy spreadsheet. It's like, please make sense of it and give me a report. If you're in management, here is a bunch of other reports. Tell me what the story is here. Now, keep in mind, depending on which field you're in, it could be a little buggy, but I assure you within 6 months, it's going to be perfect. And you want to be able to work now, know how it works now, then wait for 6 months. People who are going to be ahead of the curve here are the ones that are doing just that. There are people who are consultants. So let's just talk about consultants really quick as an example. So consultants charge by the hour. So do attorneys. They charge by human hours, and they tend to rack up prices for what are, tasks that are done by entry level positions. So a lot of reporting, a lot of analyzing, and a lot of report making that can be done in a matter of minutes now.
Right.
So a lot of entry-level positions are going to be cut. As a matter of fact, that's not a secret. The president of Anthropic said within 1 to 5 years, about up to 80% of entry-level positions are going to be taken away.
Yeah, which is kind of scary, right?
It's very sad, actually.
Yeah.
And it opens up a whole different debate of how do we get those kiddos ready and what's the purpose of college and all that good stuff. That's a totally different debate. But learning how to use it, I think will be of the best interest of that person. If you are a corporate leader, a company leader, then I feel that if you think AI is going to truly impact the headcount of your company, then that's my term.
Life.
Yep, that's my son.
Yeah.
It is the opportunity for them to do some introspection and find out how are you going to help your employees, such as are you going to be reskilling? Are you going to be training them to do something different so they don't have to worry about being in an employment line? So there's many things to think of, but yeah, the two most practical things is try to get the $20 version. Doesn't matter if it's Anthropic or OpenAI, and challenge it. Do the task that you don't like to do that's related to your field, and task the AI to do it. And I think you'll be incredibly surprised.
Thank you for that, because I think also what I would always tell my students when I was teaching was also that, use the technology as a tool,
Mm-hmm.
but be careful. It's like a fine line. Don't use it as a lifeline.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when we start becoming too dependent on it, it's like we start to lose our critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think also there's that, that gray area where we also have to be careful. And to your point, yes, we have to be familiar with it so we're not left behind.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, how do we challenge it so that we're still relevant? In some way, shape, or form, because we can't lose our relevancy. Otherwise, what are we going to do? So it's one of those, it's a really interesting time that we find ourselves in, regardless, like you said, of industry, because
Mm-hmm.
it's impacting everyone. To be able to say, I'm going to use AI as a tool, but this is what I can offer. This is, my gift. like my
Mhm.
talent, and I can then use this, but then I can offer X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that
Right.
it is that you do. And so I think that's the biggest challenge. But I do think you're right. It's being trying to be as relevant as possible, ahead of the curve in as much as you can, and also be aware,
Hmm.
of having,
Correct.
if you're currently working, have that emotional intelligence to really know what's going on, have your finger on the pulse, not just within your work environment, but also within the industry that you happen to
Correct.
be in,
Absolutely.
to make sure that, listen, inevitably, probably the rug is going to get pulled from under you, but and as much as you can be prepared, I think that's important.
Right.
Which, speaking of that, your husband in the book that you mentioned, because there's so many great lessons that you share, that's one of the things I love about your book. And you put, like, at the end of every chapter, like, areas for you to, you know, the reader to, like,
Hmm.
think about, and
Hmm.
I love that. But he gave you this SAC:
Zach.
save, anticipate, and connect.
Correct.
Um, Talk a little bit about that, because I think that has something to do with just prepping for your life, right?
And again, this all goes back to working for an organization such as disaster and emergency management, where you're either in the thick of the chaos or you're preparing for it. And my husband by training is an engineer, so he started off as an aerospace engineer, rocket scientist, master's in mechanical engineering, and everything but dissertation in biomedical engineering. He is an engineer in his way of thinking. And what does that mean? That means to identify problems and solve them. That's what engineers do. So he came up with this, I don't know, creed, philosophy. I don't even know what to call it, but he calls it SAC. And he has been instilling this in our children since day one, which is, don't wait to make a really big income in your 30s to start saving. Start saving with every little check that you get and learn how to invest. So he's been teaching our children to do that. A is for to anticipate. And that is something that he, in guiding me with my own journey and helping me with my book and helping raise our children, is to anticipate. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive. So anticipate. That's why it's important to read the trade journals, to be up with the news, whether it's with AI or with economic volatility in your industry, or what the different federal policies are. If your job is involved, you should be up to date, or at least try to be, so that you can anticipate and then you can make whatever right decisions you need to do for yourself and for your family. He also reminded me that even if you're comfortable, let's say you're in a position, all seems fine, question yourself, challenge yourself. If X, Y, and Z is supposed, should happen, how am I prepared for that? Am I taking the right steps now to prepare me for a scenario where X, Y, and Z happens? He does that often. Sometimes he's a bit of a chicken little, but I love
I love that.
him.
Oh,
We
that's
balance each
awesome.
other out very, very well.
Yes.
And and lastly, the C is for connections. That always try to build connections. Do not burn bridges. Whether it's now, like for example, my son, he's in sixth grade. We tell him, you want to, maintain good relationships with your teachers. You don't know if one day you need like a letter of recommendation for a club in high school or something like that. And with my daughter, who's currently wrapping up her senior year at college, she's been working on her connections since high school to help her to go through med school. It's through those connections that she's, found opportunities to shadow surgeons at Johns Hopkins, where she has been able to shadow doctors as they consult patients. It's through connections that she got a really good job over the summer last year. It's teaching them that we are so much stronger when we work together than if we were to do things by ourselves and alone.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's that.
I love that. I love that, because it's like, it's so true, and it's so practical, right? Such
Mhm,
practical advice.
mhm.
I loved all of that. And something that you and I were also talking about briefly, before we started recording, was this whole notion of like putting ourselves out there,
Mm-hmm.
and like actually positioning yourself and branding yourself.
Branding yourself.
Yeah, right. Like both of us, funny enough, like we did that for other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We created communications, in your case, communication stories for organizations
Mm-hmm.
or people or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the same in the media world. And now we're doing it for ourselves. And so, I just wanted to bring that up because I also think it's important for people to, especially in our generation, like we were taught, you know what? You keep your head down, you work
Mm-hmm.
hard, you're going to succeed. And hey,
Right.
it worked. It worked, until it didn't. Right. And
Until I
so
did it. There you
until
go.
all of a sudden it didn't. Right. And so because everything's changed so quickly, and there is something valuable to be said about defining your personal branding and positioning yourself in the
Correct.
market. And so I feel that that's important to highlight as well, because I think a lot of people, I think the younger generations are better at it than maybe the Gen Xers are, but it's something that we need to be able to do and do it
Mhm.
effectively. And,
Correct.
and in the case of the younger generations, just be careful with social media and what you're
Mm.
putting out there and how you're positioning yourself, because it does speak volumes as to, who you are, right? And what you are, what you can offer to a company or an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's something that is of value.
Correct. And is there forever.
Yes,
Once it's up, uh,
it,
even
it
if you
won't
take
go
measures
away.
to pull it down, someone will have a screenshot of it, someone will have a video of it, someone will have some form of record. So the best way to mitigate that is not to put any questionable content up in the first place. But
Exactly.
to your point, I think if used correctly, especially for those students who are in college or who will be graduating soon or looking at going to graduate school or whatever the next step may be, using social media wisely can also help them in improving their chances to nail that interview or maybe to get that job. So, for example, if you're a pre-med student, talk about the research studies that you have been doing. Obviously, keep HIPAA,
Yeah,
be
yeah.
very HIPAA minded, but talk about some of the things that you're working at. Talk about your volunteer opportunities, volunteer experiences at the hospital. If you're in high school, talk about that really cool debate that you did or that really cool project that you did to help a food shelter in the middle of of the inner city. Talk about those things. I mean, those things will help you, and to your point, will help you build your brand. I do agree that younger generations are much better than that, just because they have been dealing with this way longer than we have. Whether
Yes.
it's with Twitter and TikTok and look at me now, and that they've been building their brands. They actually can teach us about building brands better than we can. But it's true. We will be moving from one place to another for our whole lives, whether it's a nonprofit to healthcare to profit to, a firm or what have you. We're going to be constantly moving, but what remains intact is your personal brand. It's what we used to call growing up your reputation. You need to
Yes.
safeguard your reputation, whether it's acting in a certain way or getting in a certain class or graduating with a certain honor. Is your reputation. And that's what building a brand is, because you're right. You and I are no longer, such strongly attached to a certain entity or logo anymore. We're building it for ourselves. And I challenge anyone who is going through some form of change right now to look in, really highlight the things that you do well, highlight the things that make you you, things that make you happy, things that make other people happy, and make that a part of your brand. And just let yourself shine. Share your joy.
Yeah. Cynthia, thank you so much. I normally ask what, a dose of wisdom, but you've your entire conversation has just been one dose of wisdom after another after another. There's so many lessons that you've learned in this journey. And I thank you so much for your willingness to share those lessons with others through your book. Once again, Redefined, which is great. I love it. And just, in your conversations and the posts that you're putting out there, because I think that in the process of you growing and you learning and you're going through this journey, you're really helping other people. So
I hope so.
I'm so grateful to you for that. And speaking of the book, where can people find you? Where can people buy your book? Let's promote you.
Well, thank you very much. It is currently on Amazon, and also you can download it on Kindle. The book is available in some of the independent stores here in Maryland, but for anyone outside of the Baltimore area, please, you can go to Amazon and on Kindle. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do, Cynthia Gutierrez-White. Also, and my LinkedIn page, there's access to my blog where I continue this conversation on all the different disruptors in today's job market and what you can do to get ahead. All that is there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Cynthia, once again, thank you so very much
My pleasure.
for
The pleasure
being
was
here.
all mine, Joni.
Oh my goodness, thank you. And I can't wait to see you in person soon. It's been so
I
long.
know.
So we'll have to plan a trip, either you to South Florida or me up there to Baltimore. But it was great reconnecting with you.
Likewise,
And
what a pleasure.
yes, and you know what? Part of the SAC, advice, just maintaining connections
Correct.
is a beautiful gift. So I wish you all the best.
Me too.
And
Nothing
you
but the
can.
best.
Yes, and you continue to go out there. And for all of you out there listening or watching, remember that you are never alone. Let's go out and seek wisdom together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap it any better than that.
Thank you for joining us on the Seeking Wisdom podcast. If you enjoyed our content, hit that like button, subscribe, leave a review, or share so that we can keep building this community together.